our family back to another edition of the Parent Power podcast. I'm your host, William Richardson. We have, again, another esteemed panel of folks who are here to discuss and share their experiences and their expertise on the topic of special education. And that has taken on a whole new, different kind of effect now that we're in this temporary, at least temporary age of dealing with the coronavirus, COVID-19, as a part of our daily lives. So I'm gonna have everyone introduce themselves. Well, I'll just introduce everyone because there's quite a few folks on the call. We have Charvette. You want to just say hi to the people, Charvette? Charvette, you there? Oh, you.
Hi, I'm Charvette Barfield. I apologize. Technology.
All right.
Technology. Hi, I'm from the Parents Place of Maryland.
All right. Thank you for joining, Charvette. We have Margot Farnay. You want to speak to everyone, Ms. Farnay?
Hi. I'm a self-contained teacher at Fort Worthington. So I teach middle school self-contained classroom, special educator.
Wonderful to have you. Katie?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. I'm Katie Smeltz. I'm a Kerwin Fellow with Rebecca, and also I have a special needs son with autism who's 14, and I work for SEEK, where we help developmentally disabled young adults find jobs after high school.
All right, thank you. Ms. Marlin, we have you back with us again.
Hello, I'm a former educator of 20 years, having taught in New York City, DC, and Baltimore. I'm also a parent of a 16-year-old and a 10-year-old.
All right, and last but certainly not least, we have Miss Bonita.
Hi, my name's Bonita Williams. I am a Kerwin Fellow. And in addition, I have a second grader in a learning center in Montgomery County. I am a member of X Minds, which is an autism organization. And did I say everything? And did I say the PTA president? So yes, I'm happy to be here.
All right. Thank you all so much for not only joining us, but also for your patience as we're working out some technical issues, and also for our audience watching us live on Facebook. Thank you all, family. I appreciate you all joining us, especially in this time frame. Before we get started with the content of special education, I want to do a connection question. We're going to run this question and let everyone in the panel answer. And the question is, what new thing have you reflected on since being sheltered in place, or since things have been shut down and we're not able to go about our lives as usual? So what new thing have you reflected on? It could be about anything, something that since you haven't been able to move as freely, maybe you slowed down and you've thought about. Margot, we'll start with you.
Sure. I think that the thing I've been thinking about the most is just how unimportant some things are, like the things, like the small details that used to like govern our lives every single day that seemed so incredibly important, kind of melt away when this kind of like epidemic is happening. And I think it's one of the things that we're all in together. Like, it's not people against people, it's like everyone against this infection. So yeah.
Thank you. Charvette? Charvette, can you hear me? You can't hear me, Charvette?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. You're muted, Charvette.
Taking on a new regular. Can you hear me?
Yes. Can you repeat it one more time, please?
Thank you. So I guess it's just taking think a new regular, changing, and it's a regular day, and no matter what, just that you're responsible for is look.
Okay. We were cutting off a little bit there. I think we got the gist of it. Yeah, things are definitely not what they used to be for sure. Katie, how would you respond? What thing have you reflected on that's new, a new reflection since the COVID-19 outbreak?
So I've been teaching my son at home last week with an autism waiver person who's still going out and coming to my house. And I feel like my son has learned a lot that he has not been able to learn in the past, because we were able to really spend a lot of time and personalize things for him. He had a real breakthrough with money, learning the difference between all the different coins. Also, how important routine is to my life, and when it gets messed up, I need to create it because I need it. I also am one of those people who has FOMO. Do you know, like, fear of missing out? So I thought, oh, good, finally, I'm not going to be like having FOMO. But I'm still having FOMO because I look at my neighbors and they're like having like campouts in their backyard, and so I'm still having FOMO, even though like there's a lot less going on. And I found a lot of stuff in my house that I have not been using that is very useful. So I've had time to sort of declutter and found some stuff that I've been looking for years. So yeah, that's what I've figured out. Thanks. That's a good question.
Thank you. Marlon, how about you?
I think the other day when we had our meeting, Anaya was in the background. So she was like, she mentioned, Mommy, you said something about understanding how kids learn. So let me tell you what I need. And she informed me. And this morning when she woke up, she was having some anxiety about, work that needed to be done. And so I understood that after the academics was taken care of, it was really important to infuse her artistry because she's a very creative being. And so I remember on our call, we talked about like arts and crafts and just infusing things that children, our children love to do. So she was able to get paint and canvas and go get it. Go and get the paintings. She was able to get a lot of art supplies yesterday and just bellowed out all these amazing pieces of artwork. And I was like, this is really showing me that, and I've known that we have little people who are really creative, and they're being placed in environments where we're probably not able to tap into, who they truly are. And so this is one of her paintings of a popsicle dripping and being splashed. And then another one. And so just
Beautiful.
taking a moment to embrace what is.
To embrace what is. Beautiful. Ms. Bonita, how about you? One new thing that you reflected upon since our lives have changed.
What I've reflected on is trying to accept what's happening now. That's what I've been reflecting on, that I can't believe what's happening. But what I am appreciating is the time that I've had with my son and the time at my house to kind of go through and to finish projects that I've had, and especially the time with my son and working with him with his schoolwork. The young lady that spoke before me said something that I really feel. She said, we have they're little people, and they have talents that we're not able to, if they're in this regular school environment, we're not able to kind of pull them out. So we've just kind of been exploring things as we've been doing our lesson and doing, quite a few science projects, over the course of the days. But I'm just, trying to appreciate this time that we have here and trying to stay safe. That's what I've been thinking about.
All right, thank you all. And for me, before we go to Margot. For me, it's just that it's okay to not have so much structure. And I know for a lot of us in the educational system, a great part of not only our personal day, but our school day is highly structured. And it's kind of taken some getting used to in terms of, all right, it's all right to just relax and, read and put on a book and be creative in my own right. So thank you all for participating. Margot, I'm going to start with you. And I think special ed is one of those terms that, many people have an opinion about, but not everyone knows clearly what it means. And I'm happy to say that I have been in your classroom and see the love, the care, the devotion, and expertise that you dedicate to the students for Worthington, and just how beautifully you orchestrate your classroom and you foster those relationships. So I'd like you to first give us kind of a definition of what special education means in the public school system, and then I'll have some follow-ups for you.
Sure. I think for me, so I am constantly battling, oh, you're in special ed, that I hear, other students or the gen ed kids saying to my students. And I have some students that are very curious. They come and they're like, oh, your kids are special ed, are they retarded? Are they and they use these kind of words where I'm like, oh, hold on, we need to have a conversation about what this means. And when they ask that question, and me and my students in my class even talk about this, why are you in my class? Because we are pretty separated from gen ed. We kind of talk about the fact that they just learn differently. We just have conversations about the fact that they're not slower, they're not, there's nothing wrong with them. It's that they learn differently. Whereas some students would be able to read a book and be able to tell you all the information. Maybe my students need to listen. My students need to see visuals. They kind of need more different inputs other than just reading or writing. They just need different materials. So again, it's not a matter of being slower or worse than other students. It's just a matter of getting what they need in order to learn appropriately.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, the stigma, is huge. I remember when I was in elementary school, it was a huge thing that the special ed students, and at that time there was no integration of gen ed and special ed. It was just special ed self-contained at the time that I was growing up. But there was this looming stigma, and there still is,
right?
About our students that learn differently. And what's interesting is that everybody learns differently.
Right,
No one
exactly.
very few people learn in the exact same manner. Just want to follow up. So can you give us an overview of the IEP process? So what is an IEP? What's the process? What's the SST? We got you working today, Margot. SST process, and also the 504 plan. So if you could just elucidate us, please, for that.
Sure. So an IEP is an individualized education program. So when a student is determined to have needs outside of the gen ed curriculum, so outside of the gen ed class, so needs physical, mental, emotionally, that cannot be satisfied by the gen ed curriculum or a gen ed classroom, they get an IEP. And this just means that they have a document that lists their present levels of academic functioning and performance. So what are they doing? What can they do in reading, math, writing? What are their deficit areas? And then it gives them what we call goals. So there's goals attached to each of these objectives. So on top of getting gen ed curriculum, with accommodations and modifications, they also have goals that they have to fulfill to kind of make progress. A lot of the times for our students with disabilities, they don't need to focus so much on mastery, but they need to focus on the progress on their instructional level. So they still get their gen ed curriculum, but the IEP makes sure that they get the instructional level information that they need. And then I guess I should talk about
That's-
accommodations and modifications as well. Those are just
Mhm.
changes or modifications to the curriculum, to their work, to the environment that kind of help them get that gen ed curriculum. So it can be something as simple as like preferential seating, they get to sit near the board, or chunking of text. So taking the same gen ed text, but making a little bit smaller for them to synthesize it easier. The SST process is kind of the build up to an IEP or to a 504 plan. So when we notice a student is struggling, normally they're in gen ed, a student is struggling either behaviorally, academically, one of the indicators is failing a class, then we go through what's called the SST process. So there's documents filed by the teachers, and that process has started to get them the accommodations, modifications, or help that they need to really excel in their school environment.
Great. And then the 504 plan?
The 504 plan is, and I don't want to misspeak, so I don't have many 504s, so if somebody else wants to jump in if I misspeak. But a 504 is kind of like an IEP, but a little bit less. And so it's still a structure in place to support the student in the classroom and throughout their school day, but it's less
Academic.
Yeah, it's less academic and more for behavioral. So they can still stay in gen ed. We always want students to be in their least restrictive environment. So where can they function to the best of their ability? And so we don't want to put students in a very restrictive, like for example, we don't want to put them in self-contained if they don't need that much support. So we want students to be able to challenge themselves in the academic atmosphere as well.
Can you dispel a myth about the special ed scholar having to always be in special ed necessarily for the rest of their academic career?
Absolutely. That is one of my my personal, so, teachers, obviously we have like personal things that we want to do in life as well. And that's one of my like personal things that means a lot to me, is getting students back into gen ed. A lot of students, say, oh, I'm in special ed, I'm in self-contained, I'll never, I'm just going to stay here. But even in our class, one of the major things that we talk about often is, what do you need to do to get into gen ed? And that's actually a huge impetus for a lot of my students is I want to do really well in reading so that I could go and push out into a social studies class. I could go push out into a science class if I'm good at math. So I think, and luckily our school is pretty good about doing what's called mainstreaming. And so mainstreaming is when a student is in gen ed for as much as possible. So that way their socialization is not stunted. So even if they need academic help, they still get to socialize and be with their peers, their age and grade level appropriate peers, even if their academic work is more supported.
All right. Thank you. Katie, you mentioned that I don't know if your son, your daughter?
It was on mute. Yes, my son. He's 14 with autism.
Right, and you said there's someone that is, since schools have been closed, coming to help him?
Yeah, so I'm lucky enough to have something called the autism waiver, where I get a certain amount of hours for respite, and something called ISS, which is Instructional Support Services, I believe. And so I get 25 hours of instructional support, even when school is up and running. So I'm using it during the school day, and I'm having my son do 2 hours of school a day while he's off. And then we do like an hour of exercise. So yeah, that's been great. And it's been really, you sound like an amazing teacher, Margot. Unfortunately, I haven't had the experience of having someone as amazing as you every year. And this year, his teacher has been telling me he's only 20% present. So it's been really great for me to see how we get him engaged in his learning. The autism waiver person and I, like, we've been using his interests. He loves the Power Rangers, so we've been using the Power Rangers as like an entryway into learning about money. And he's really sensory, so we found out that the nickel is flat on the side. the ridge is flat on a nickel and it's ridged on a quarter. And we've been working on this for like years, like 3 years. And we had this big breakthrough because he's sensory. So I was thinking, like, let's feel it. And that did it. Like, now at least we've mastered the quarter and the nickel. But it took, and I think it's like what you said about, it did take being a little unstructured and just sort of sitting there and feeling the money and trying to see what's the difference in feeling it. So yeah, I don't know if what you wanted to know about the autism waiver, but yeah, when your child is diagnosed with a developmental disability, well, actually autism in particular, you can be put on a wait list. And it took my son 11 years to get off the wait list. So we literally, at his age 2, put him on the wait list, and we didn't get off until he was 13. So we now have this great thing called the autism waiver, and it goes until he's 21. So I'm divorced, so I'm alone with him a lot, and so it's really nice that I have that support for respite if I want to go to a movie with a friend, or it doesn't break the bank if I need childcare, because right now he does not feel comfortable being alone, and nor does anyone feel comfortable with him being alone just yet. So I still need childcare. Most 14-year-old moms don't still need to worry about childcare as much. So it can get really expensive. So this waiver really helps with that. And that's a state, it's a state program, I believe. It's through Medicaid. So is that state? You guys could tell me, is Medicaid state?
It's federal.
I'm trying. Yeah, so anyway, that's all I wanted to share about that. I don't know if there was any...
I'm glad you did, because my next question was, if there are other parents, in a similar predicament, how would they obtain those services? You said it's a state program. Where did you go exactly to get him involved in the program?
So like I said, it's a part of Medicaid. I'm trying to remember how so we signed up when he was 2 years old, and my ex-husband at the time actually signed him up for it. But I think it was through the department. I think it was through. Benita, are you on the call? Do you know where do we sign up for the waiver? It's been so many years.
It's through the state of Maryland's Department of I believe it's Health and Human Services or something. Yeah, it's Health and Human Services, the state's Health and Human Services. But
if you're going to talk to parents, just tell them to Google the autism waiver, and it comes up. The application comes up.
Okay. Bonita, are there other? I'm sorry, Katie.
No, that's all. That's all I was going to say.
Bonita, are there other waivers for other disabilities out there that parents could go to? You have any? Or for that either. Do you have any expertise on that?
Okay, so you're aware of the LISS program? Where,
no. Can you make our audience aware?
Okay, it's a program for children with disabilities. It's not income based. You apply, and they run it twice a year. It's a lottery. They run it twice a year. You fill out an application, run it twice a year. If you're chosen, you get $2,000 to apply to services such as occupational therapy or speech therapy or camps or anything therapeutic, summer camp, things of that nature. And someone else can add in what I missed. Then there's another program through the ARC of Montgomery County called the Respite Program, and that is income-based, and they will help pay for camps and things like that, or they'll provide you respite. But it's they call it, the kid, they might be paying for a theater class, which they've done for my son, so it's they will pay a portion of it, but it is income-based. And then there's a program in Montgomery County through the Department of Health in Montgomery County, and it's probably state funds, I'm sure, a My Turn program, and they also provide about $1,000 a year, and they pay a portion of camps or classes, things like that. Nothing therapeutic. Each program has its own rules, so Yeah, those are the ones that I'm aware of. But lists will give you 2,000 if you're chosen in the lottery, and it's wonderful because, like for instance, my husband's insurance doesn't pay for speech therapy, so I could put it towards that. So yeah, that's what I know.
Great. Thank you. Charvette, you have anything to add? Charvette, can you hear us?
I just want to add that a lot of resources can be, can you hear me now?
Yes. You just muted yourself, Charvette.
There are a lot of services on the Parents Place of Maryland website for services for children with special health care as well as special needs. And parents and one of the participants shared that families should really apply for these things early on. A lot of times families don't know about these services until the children are in transition age. But they should sign up as early as possible because there's wait lists for all of these things mostly that can benefit the child now as opposed to waiting until the end when they age out.
Okay, now Charvette, when you say early on, what age are you talking about?
As soon as possible, right?
As soon as yes. Yes, when they become aware that a child has a developmental disability, if you will, or a challenge, or even the list funds are not just for families or children, it's for adults as lottery, as was said by one of the participants. So anyone can actually sign for the list funding. But again, you should do your own research and look at the timelines that these things should be applied for, and get the to sign up for those things.
All right. Excellent. Marlon, I wanted to go to you. Being an experienced educator, you spoke about teaching for 20 years. What was it like for you as a gen ed teacher to have students with special needs where obviously you could recognize that? What kind of challenges were presented in the general ed classroom for you?
Well, there were numerous challenges in the inner city classrooms that I was in because I've always been in, quote unquote, those neighborhoods. And so I've always been really cognizant about how people feel. And so my students who did have those learning disabilities or who were special ed and would have pullouts or would lack confidence in certain things, I always felt the need to make sure that they felt a part of the class, and that the entire body of the class understood that there is no difference and we're all working together. It was always really important to make sure that kinesthetics was a part of the lessons because just sitting there never did it for me. Like, I felt like, especially focusing on history, like you have to make it come alive. And so there were many challenges, but I think with challenges comes the opportunity to be creative. And so I was always able to be creative with the students and to try to make sure that they're getting all that they need in every way. So let's tie in music, let's tie in movement. I've had students who were autistic or on the spectrum, and people didn't understand why that child would hate gym or throw their silent signal up when they went into the gym class because it was overstimulating for them. And so giving
them the option to have lunch with me or to do something alternative during that time when, you know, everyone else would be like, well, he just has to go to gym. You know, for me, I was never that type of person. Like, no, he doesn't. Because if he's going to be in gym class overstimulated and upset, that's not good for none of us, you know? And so I think towards the end of my career, I was able to just look at a group and be like, okay, well, this is how I have to make sure that I'm prepared for them. Because, you know, when I taught at KIPP, we had to go and visit the classrooms. And so there were certain classes where you just knew, okay, I'm going in here today. I need to make sure that all 30 of my pencils are sharpened because no one's going to have a sharpened pencil. You know, they need to have really low music while they're doing their bell ringer. So just setting up those regimens to make sure that everyone felt safe and felt as if they weren't just there, you know, being lost, but try to find a way to give them the best knowledge, you know. And when I said bell ringer, I'm talking about like when students first come in to the classroom, there's something that you give them, like a quick assignment just to settle them. So some people call it the do now, some people call it the bell ringer, whatever.
Right. Thank you. Marla, I'm going to stick with you though, because I want you to put in your words from the teacher's point of view, from the gen ed teacher's point of view, why it is important to move past the stigma for the parent who has a child like one that you described in your classroom. How can the IEP process or obtaining an IEP after the SST process, how can it help that child? I think some parents are stuck on the stigma part of it where, you know, I don't want people to think my child is dumb, so forth and so on.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And for that, I would say that the IEP is a handcrafted way to make sure that your child receives what they need. So for example, let's say you have children with dietary restrictions, and if you give them, you know, certain foods, then they'll get sick. It's the same thing in education. You know, an IEP is really a fine-tuned descriptive that explains how your child best learns. And I think in life, you know, almost everything is going to have its stigma, but an IEP has way more benefits for children so that they can get their needs met and so that they're able to travel through this educational path with the least amount of glitches possible. You know, and it's also binding because we do need contracts when children aren't receiving what they need. We do need to look back at things and say, well, they were supposed to receive this accommodation or this modification, and this was stated on this date. Can you please show me how you are doing that for my child? You know, and so definitely.
Thank you.
The benefits of an IEP surpasses the drama or the darkness of the stigma.
Thank you. Bonita, if I could go to you, if you were going to help parents prepare for an IEP meeting, what would you tell them? What advice would you give them? That can be certainly a daunting moment where they're trying to advocate for their child, but may not have all the expertise that they might think that they need to articulate correctly what their child needs or would benefit from.
Well, I have been in that situation. I would tell them to, you have to know your child, first of all. Tell them to read the IEP over, up and down. And if, you know, I hate to say this, they don't feel that they can properly represent their child, maybe get someone to go with them, an advocate or someone that they know that could help them with the IEP. It's a real learning process. And I'm still learning a lot about IEPs and what my role is. And I tell the parents that they are important in this process as well, because sometimes you get to the table and the team has already made a decision, or they, you know, it's easy to feel like you're sitting there and just kind of watching something happen, but you have to have some input or have your say and let them know that you care about your child, because they will just make decisions, and then these are decisions that you will have to live with, that you'll be living with, not them. So I tell them to try to educate themselves as much about the process as they could. Places like the Parents Place of Maryland are wonderful. I went there once before an IEP and sat down with someone, and they went through my IEP and spoke with me. Most recently, I've hired an advocate to help me with just kind of get through the process, because the school system, they know what they have, they know what they can do and what they can't do, what they should be doing, and that doesn't mean they're necessarily doing it. But seek out resources as much as you can. That's what I'd say.
Thank you. And Bonita, where does your advocate come from? How did you get your advocate?
Well, I belong to an organization called X Minds, which is an autism organization in Montgomery County, and I found my advocate through that organization. So, and then so she's Katie's familiar with the organization. She's a member of that organization as well. But they are all over the state. The Parents Place of Maryland would, be able to help with that. Yeah, so they're not hard to find.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Charvette,
I was just going to add, the Parents Place of Maryland has classes that I've been trying to get to about how to, I think they have classes on more about how to, like, just the ins and outs of IEPs and how to advocate for your child.
all right, thank you. The Parents Place of Maryland, thank you.
Hi, thanks for being included. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So the Parents Place believe that the parent is the child's best advocate. And so we help the parents to understand that each of us have strengths and weaknesses. And we try to help parents to build on where they think that they're not strong in, such as understanding the IEP process, as well as understanding page by page the IEP document and or evaluations, and helping them to be able to learn the advocate skills that are necessary to be the only permanent member on the IEP team itself. You'll get a new teacher, you'll get a new administrator, you all of that, but the parent is a permanent person that we in the child use life and knows the child best. And try to help the parents to understand that because a child has a disability, does not guarantee them to have an IEP, but to be able to look at some of the accommodations and or services or strategies that can fulfill the gap that have been identified through assessments. The Parents Place services are free also to parents. And most of my colleagues, as well as myself, I'm grandparenting two of my 10 grandchildren who have IEPs. So we know the language because we build our own. And so sometimes parents can feel very open when they talk to another parent who is walking the same journey are in the process in education and in life, because one of the questions that often are asked is the IEP for life? It is not. It shouldn't be, because most children will exit out of the educational system pre-K through 12, and they'll go on to college, the world to work, as a transitioning age youth into the adult life, and sometimes they go to college. And so there'll be other services such as their 504 plan that will come into effect for that person should they need that support. But yes, the Parents Place has a lot of information because we also engage in conversations with professionals as well around various topics.
All right. And you mentioned, Marlon, you actually mentioned this being a document. Charvette, I'd like to stay with you. What laws help to bring the IEP and its guarantees about for the student?
It's called IDEA. It's an acronym, the Visual Disabilities Education Act. And a lot of languages in there that safeguards the service and supports for a child or youth. And you were talking about the 504 plan, and that's governed around ADA, you know, because that's mostly around access, having access. Like I'm thinking about the acronym UL. There's a lot of acronyms in the world that we live in, and it's universal designed instruction, and so it's almost like the curve cuts that we see on the sidewalks. You know, that it's not just for persons with disabilities. It could be for a person that has a mobility challenge and such in a chair, needing to have access to get inside of various places. And even the doors, thinking about when you go into doors and you have to hit the button to open up the door. It could assist someone who has a lot of packages who doesn't even have a disability. Those kinds of things. To think about more proactive ways of including us. And I heard that term about mainstream, and that was something old, a term that we used many, many years ago. And a lot of times today we hear the word called inclusion, and our students are receiving services in the gen ed environment with their peers.
Right, thank you. I was going to ask, since we're at this era right now, where so many of our students are not in the classroom, not in their normal settings, they're missing a lot of special education instruction. Margot, I'd like to start with you as an educator. What kind of things have you been able to reach out to your students, A, and then B, what kind of advice would you give to the parents that are there with the child? And before you answer that, I want all of the other guests to please be thinking about the things that you're doing with your children, or Ms. Charbet, in your case, your grandchildren at home. Go ahead, Margo.
Sure. So I have reached out to all of my students, and of course, with the self-contained class, I have the privilege of having a smaller class, so I'm able to reach out individually. What I've mostly been doing is tapping into online resources, and I kind of did a survey, and just to kind of gather the information about like what technology they have available, and kind of tapping into that resource. And then if they don't have technology available, kind of making a plan to get them packets, to get them materials, to get them things that they need, and kind of relying more heavily on conferencing with them, or like I said, like paper packets. So yeah, I would say just tap into online resources. I use a platform called Freckle, which provides that instructional level work. And they may need a teacher login, but I'm pretty sure anybody can create an account. And so it has a lot of different information. Freckle is freckle.com. So it's just like freckles on your face. So freckle.com, and it provides like a lot of instructional, and they have like kindergarten through high school, I believe, work. So there's one. There's also other sites like News ELA. It has a bunch of instructional level, or like all different grade levels articles. There's other things called Story Nori, which reads to the students, Khan Academy, and also like YouTube. If you want to learn, like if you want to, you know, have your student learn about multiplication, you can just type in multiplication for elementary students. Yes, Newsela. I think some people call it Newsela.
Right.
Yeah, sorry.
Me too.
Newsela, yeah. And so, and just again, kind of like tapping, I think, especially online sites, like students that struggle with like reading and literacy are very much helped by visual or auditory things. And then outside of that, honestly, just flashcards. So if you're reading with them, try and read for at least like 20 to 30 minutes a day. When they get stuck on a word, put it on a flashcard. Multiplication, times tables, facts, automaticity can all go on flashcards. And so those materials can all be self-made. And yeah, like you were talking about earlier, money sense. You'd be surprised how many middle schoolers, struggle with simple counting and adding of coins. So that's always around. And yeah, my fourth one, honestly, is just reading. Just read anything in the house.
Thank you. Charvette, how about you and the grands?
Is there any way Margot could send that out? Because I had to answer the door real quick and I didn't get some of them. And then also, I just know so many people that would love that list from her.
Yes.
Is there any way you could just send that out to us?
Yeah, absolutely. And I have more, like I can send out a list of some of the links that I use in the classroom as well.
Margot,
That'd
if
be
you
great.
send them to me, I'll have Rebecca compile them and we'll send them out, because you're right, they're great. I'm writing them down. Great resources for our parents.
Yeah, because I was wondering, Story Nori, I wasn't sure how to spell.
Yes, I got you. I'll send it.
Okay, great.
Thank you, Margot. Charvette, how about you? With the two grandchildren you said you have with IEPs and special needs, how are you keeping them engaged? What kind of things are you doing as a parent?
Well, actually, the school system, before they all dismissed out for school, they have devices. Both of my granddaughters have devices from their schools. And so sometimes with that, it becomes a challenge of being able to get on and being able to save documents, assignments that you may not have completed before school has been out, and just trying to be able to do that. But what I found is, because I not only have my two grand girls, but I have two of my grand boys who are 8 and 9, and my grand girls are 12 and 15. And so what I needed to do was just to find out to keep their day as normal as possible. So that means like trying to incorporate and to be able to still build in mealtime and recess time. And so it's a lot of things that you just have around the house, as I heard one of the callers mention, that you can do, and each one of them are at different levels. But when you do things together in family, it seems to work out a lot on the other children's strengths to help the other ones from time to time. They won't do it all the time with their siblings, but they will at least incorporate some of their time and incorporate others in the family to be able to do recess time and take them out to different places, even if it's from a walk in the community and such. But there's a lot of planning to do, and a lot of times family members only have like one computer, and so you add all the persons that need to use a computer in a day, and it becomes really challenged. Some of persons such as myself, I've been working remotely from home since the 16th of March. And it's a challenge in trying to be able to be balanced in doing all the things that you want to try to get accomplished in a day. And trying to, most of all, make it happy, and not make it so lethargic and boring, to keep the fun in there in some kind of way. But, so I'm grateful for a lot of the resources that persons share over time, and some of the other businesses and persons who have been able to volunteer or extend themselves to fill in the gaps in many families' lives today, as we've been faced with this dilemma that we are all in.
Thank you. We're running a little bit behind schedule. I'd like to hear from Bonita. Last thought, Katie, you did let us know some of the things that you were doing in home with your son, and Marlon also with the things that you're doing with your daughter and how productive she's being. Bonita, if I could just hear from you.
Okay, so what we're doing is we received a packet from school. So we're working on some of that, but we're also, he has some little science projects that he likes. And then we've been outside. I've been trying to help him learn how to ride his bike. He's 8 years old. So we've been doing that and doing some walking. And that's what, basically, there's an app that we're on also, Brain Pop Junior. Brain Pop Junior, and another app that was recommended is called Capstone. So we've been trying to keep busy, keep him engaged, and just try to, you know, just do some things that we're not able to do when he's in school, such as, you know, the science experiments and working on practicing teaching him how to ride his bicycle.
Right. Very cool. Well, I'd like to thank all of you all for being a part of the conversation, being a part of the call, and for your patience today. And I'm sorry we normally would do our final thoughts, but we are running behind. So I'd like to thank Bonita, Marlon, Katie, Charvette, and Margot Farnay for being on the call, talking about special education. Tune in next Monday. Once again, to all our parents out there, thank you all for sticking by us and really making this podcast a success with not only you joining us, but asking those great questions. So this is William. Y'all be safe out there. Take the precautions that have been recommended. This is a very serious moment in our time right now. So let's just be wise, not only for ourselves, but remembering our children as well. So thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was fun to join.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
All right.